Hi, in the last video we had an introduction to geometry and we talked about how to identify in a right triangle which side is the opposite, which side is the adjacent, and which side is the hypotenuse. It is important to identify these sides when you're using sine, cosine, or tangent. So in this video we're going to get more into how to find missing sides of the right triangles. This first example I've actually already done once in the other video, but I'm going to do it again because now I've got some words on the screen that are going to help hopefully simplify this for you a little bit. The first thing you want to do on this is decide which corner you're going to start from. And remember, you can't start at the right angle corner, so we're going to have to either start at corner A or corner B. And it's best to start at a corner that you know how many degrees it is. So in this case, we're going to start at corner A. Then you're going to ask yourself these two questions. Now we're going to have to do this twice. We're going to have to do this once for when we're looking for x, and then we're going to have to do it again for when we're looking for y. So when we're looking for x, it says, which side am I looking for? So the answers of these questions have to be either opposite or hypotenuse or adjacent. So you might want to mark your picture. From corner A, remember the opposite side is the side across. The hypotenuse is always the hypotenuse. It's the long side or the side across from the right angle. And then the remaining side that's right next to the angle we're going from is called the adjacent side. So in this case, which side am I looking for? If I'm looking for x, I'm looking for the opposite side. Which side was I given? The side that I was given was where this 45 is, which is the adjacent side. Then look at the first letter in those two words. I've got O and A. So based on that, the ratio that has an O and an A in it is TOA. So I'm going to use the tangent ratio. Now it's important that you do this next step. We want to write out the tan and the degrees, so tan 59 degrees equals, and remember it goes in order, O over A, so it's going to be x over 45. And then when you're first learning, I like to have on the left side, I always like to put that sine or cosine or tan over 1. Eventually you'll know when you're supposed to multiply or divide, but for starters we'll always put the left side over 1. So now we're going to cross multiply and divide. So find the diagonal that has numbers in both places, or the diagonal that does not have the x. In this case, that would be the tan 59 times 45. So on my calculator, I'm going to go tan 59, and I'm going to make sure to close the parentheses, and I'm going to go times 45. And then if you want to, you can divide by 1, but of course dividing by 1 isn't going to change it at all. And you get 74.892. So we'll just call it 74.89 is what x equals. Okay, now I'm going to go through this whole process again. This time, instead of trying it for x, I'm going to do the same thing, but this time for y. So the first question is, which side am I looking for? Okay, so if I'm looking for y, now I'm looking for the hypotenuse. Which side was I given? Okay, so I'm going to go with the one that I was given in the problem, the 45, which is the adjacent again. So I'm going to look at the first letter, H and A, and if I look at my choices up above, the one that has the H and the A for the second and third letter, in this case is going to be Ka, C-A-H. So this time I'm going to use cosine. So I'm going to write it out, cosine, the degrees, 59 degrees, equals, remember it goes Ka, C-A-H, so it's adjacent over hypotenuse. So this time it's going to be 45 over y. Now you can see why I like to put the left side over 1, because this time the diagonal that does not contain the y would be the 45 times 1. So I'm going to go 45 times 1 divided by cosine 59. when I cross multiply and divide. So it's going to end up being 45 divided by cosine on my calculator, 59 equals 87.37. So y equals 87.37. So there are my answers. Okay, so let's try this again with the next example. Okay, this time, remember we need to decide which corner we're going from. So this time, I'm going to go from corner B, because that's the one that has the 36 degrees. That's one that has the degrees marked in it. So from that corner, I'm going to ask myself the two questions. First of all, I'm trying to find x. So which side am I looking for? Well, from corner B, the x is opposite. The hypotenuse, remember that's the long side across from the right angle. And so where the 4 is, that must be the adjacent. So which side am I looking for? If I'm looking for x, I'm looking for the opposite. And which side was I given? Well, I was given the 4, so I was given the adjacent side. So now I'm going to look at the first letter in those two words, O and A, and that's how I know for this one I'm going to use TOA, which is tangent. Next step, I'm going to write out the equation, tan, and I put the degrees, tan 36 equals opposite over adjacent. So in this case it would be opposite is x over 4. I'll put the left side over 1. So the diagonal that the x is not a part of would be this diagonal. I'm going to multiply tan 36, remember to close the parentheses, times 4, and then we're going to divide by 1, but that doesn't really do anything, so you don't really have to divide by 1. So on your calculator, try tan 36, close your parentheses, times 4. And that equals 2.906. So we'll call it 2.91. We'll round things to the hundredths place. So x equals 2.91. Okay, we're going to do it again. This time we're going to try it for y. Same two questions. Which side am I looking for? Well, from this corner B, I'm looking for y, so I'm looking for the hypotenuse. And which side was I given? Well, in this case, I was given the 4, so I was given the adjacent. Look at the first letter in those two words, H and A. Okay, there isn't an H and an A in that order, but there is an A and an H. It's actually the second and third letters that you're looking at. So in this case, we're using ka, or cosine. So if I write it out, I've got cosine 36 equals A over H, so adjacent over hypotenuse, so equals 4 over y. I'll put the left side over 1. So then remember I cross multiply, so this time the diagonal that does not have the y in it is the 4 times 1, so I'm going to go 4 times 1 divided by cosine 36. So I'll go 4 divided by cosine 36 on my calculator, and I get 4.94. So y equals 4.94. Which makes sense because remember that's going to be the longest side, and I've got one side that's 4 and one side that's 2.91 for the two legs, so it makes sense that the hypotenuse would be a little longer than that. Okay, so we've got two more to do. Okay, so this time remember we start out by finding out which corner we're going from. So this time we're going from corner B because that's the one where I know how many degrees it is. And I'll start out by looking for x. So which side am I looking for? Okay, well from this corner the y would be the opposite, because remember opposite means across the triangle. The x would be the adjacent, and then the 8 is the hypotenuse. So which side am I looking for? If I'm looking for x, I'm looking for the adjacent. Which side am I given? I was given the hypotenuse. So the first letter in those two words are A and H. So if I look at the second and the third letters up above, the one that's got the A and the H is ka. So I'm going to use cosine. So cosine 65 degrees equals A over H, because remember it's ka, so A over H. So that's going to be the x on top over the hypotenuse, which is 8. Now by now you might be noticing that when the x is on the top, that's when we really don't need to put it over 1. It's when the x is on, or it's when the x or the y is on the bottom that we're going to divide. But I'll keep putting it the left side over 1 just to be safe here at first. So this time we're going to go cosine 65 times 8 divided by 1. So cosine 65, make sure you close the parentheses, times 8 is going to give us the answer. So x equals cosine 65 times 8 on my calculator is 3.38. Okay, now we're going to do it again to try and find y. Okay, so now we're going to do the same two questions for y. Which side am I looking for? Okay, so this time the y is the opposite. Which side was I given? Well, I was given the 8, so that's still my the side I was given is still the hypotenuse. So in this case, the first letters are O and H, so I'm going to use so, because that's one that has the O and the H in it. So I'm going to use sine. So I write out my equation, sine 65 equals opposite over hypotenuse. So from corner B, it's going to be the opposite is the y over the 8. So this again is one of the ones where you just multiply sine 65 times 8. You don't really have to divide it by 1. So y is going to equal whatever sine 65 times 8 is. So sine 65, close the parentheses, times 8 equals 7.25. Okay, so there's our answers. And again, it does make sense again because the x and the y are the legs, and the hypotenuse is 8, so x and y have to both be less than 8, and so that makes sense. Remember, the pictures aren't always going to be drawn to scale, so it's not always going to be, like in this case, the answers look like the x should be about half of y, and they look pretty similar in size, but the pictures aren't always drawn to scale. So we just have one more. So we'll slide our words down here and scroll down. Okay, so the first decision we have to make is which corner are we going from? In this case, we'll go from corner E, because that's where the 23 degrees is. And if we're trying to find x, okay, which side am I looking for? Well, from this corner, the x would be the opposite, and the y would be the adjacent. The 34 would be the hypotenuse. Okay, so which side am I looking for? I'm looking for the opposite. Which side was I given? Well, the number I was given was the 34, so I was given the hypotenuse. So in this case, I'm going to use so, because that's the one that has the O and the H. So I set up my equation, sine, you put the degrees, 23, equals opposite over hypotenuse. So x over 34. Okay, the left side, we don't really have to put it over 1 because the x is on top, but just to be safe, we'll do that. So this is another multiply one where we can just go sine 23 times 34, and if you want to divide it by 1, you don't really need to. So sine 23, make sure you close the parentheses, times 34 equals 13.28. Okay, now we'll do it again. This time we'll do it for y. Which side am I looking for? From corner E, the y is the adjacent. Which side am I given? Well, we still were given the 34, so we were given the hypotenuse, so I can leave that the same. So the first letters are A and H, and that means we're going to use ka, or cosine. So I write out my equation, cosine, then the degrees, 23, equals A over H, so that would be y over 34. If you want to put the left side over 1 just to be safe. But you can see on this one it's going to be cosine 23 times 34. So cosine 23, close the parentheses, times 34, and I get 31.30 if I round to the nearest hundredth. So again, remember the picture is not necessarily drawn to scale, but that might be kind of close. So here's what x and y equals, and that's how you find missing sides using trig ratios. So good luck, and let us know if you have any questions.